Hey there everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, Strix Outdoors. In this video I'm going to talk about what I think is arguably your most important piece of hunting equipment. And no, I'm not talking about any of the stuff back here, not your waders or your bow or even your shotgun. It's not any of those things, it's your freezer. And if you think about that for a moment, I think you might agree. We work hard, we have all this equipment, we spend all this time and spend all this money to hunt game of various sorts, and at the end of the day, one of the greatest prizes that you can have from that activity is having some fantastic meat to enjoy for yourself or for your family. And we rely on our freezers or refrigerators to keep that safe and edible, right, for a long time. Now, over the course of my hunting career so far, I've lost the entirety of my freezer contents twice, and it was absolutely brutal. It's an awful mess to clean up, but it's also completely demoralizing. Now, I've learned from those mistakes and I've implemented a couple of things that I think will help you, and I'm going to share those with you now. So the very first time I lost my freezer, it was because a GFCI circuit tripped on the particular circuit that the freezer was on. No one realized it until blood was running out. And so to try to stop that, I've incorporated a failed circuit alarm. So this I bought on Amazon. I think it may still be available. If it is, I'll leave links in the description below, along with the other couple things that I'm going to talk about here in a bit. But basically, you plug this in to the wall outlet or your power strip that your freezer is connected to. It has an independent battery, and so essentially this thing alarms whenever the power goes out, and it's very loud, audible, and annoying alarm. It sounds like this, and it is a continuous alarm. So as long as the power is out, it's going to keep doing that unless you turn it off. This thing has saved me twice since I bought it. It's been fantastic. The last time I was actually out of town for the night, and my neighbor called me and let me know what was going on, and we were able to address it. So the second time that I lost my entire freezer content, it was because my freezer door was ajar, and I didn't realize it, and we actually left or went out of town. So to try to address that problem, I bought a little sensor that goes on the door that alarms when the door is open and when it remains open. So it'll give you an audible chime when you open the door like this. And then if you leave the door open, it'll eventually, over a period of time, will give you a little bit louder alarm. It's going to keep chirping like this while the door is open, letting you know that it's open. And eventually, it'll change the tone. And we're going to wait for it here. There you go. So you heard that alarm. It'll keep doing that the longer the door remains open, and it resets once the door closes. So one other device that I highly recommend that you have if you don't have a readout of temperature on your freezer, and maybe even if you do, because I don't necessarily trust the digital readout, some of them have it on the outside of the freezer, is to get you a good freezer thermometer to hang in your freezer. This is oftentimes the earliest indicator that something isn't quite right with your freezer. In my case, just now, this door was actually left ajar here recently. I heard the alarm, came out and shut it, everything was still frozen. But since then, I've noticed that the freezer isn't quite cooling like it was before, and it probably needs to be defrosted. So what about you? Have you ever lost your freezer? If you have, leave a comment down below. What did you do to try to prevent that from happening in the future? Now next, I'm going to walk you through defrosting your freezer. A lot of freezers have built-in defrost features, and that's probably okay. This one I believe does as well, but it sometimes can't keep up, and especially, I live in Houston, so it's a very humid climate. So if this thing is left open for any amount of time, and this is outside currently, so anytime you open and close it, humid air goes in, frost builds up, and it eventually affects the performance of the freezer itself. So defrosting your freezer can be a bit of a pain in the rear and can take a while, but I've got a couple of tricks and tips that I'm going to share with you to be able to speed that process up. If it's something that you haven't done in a while, you should probably look into it, because even if everything is working right, the frost still does build up and it reduces the efficiency. Okay, now as I mentioned, I'm going to leave a link to this little sensor in the description below. We're going to jump into defrosting this freezer now. I've gone ahead and turned off the power. I've got a couple of ice chests that I'm going to put all the contents in, and then we're going to get to work. Quick tip to point out for organizing your freezer, I bought these little kind of bookend deals. They come in handy for like your tubes of meat and stuff. And my wife also found little baskets. These are not intended for the freezer, but I think you got these at Marshall's or somewhere, fairly cheap. Also a great tip for trying to organize your freezer a little bit better. So you can see I've got a pretty bad frost issue, and we're gonna have to remove that panel back there. I imagine it's gonna be completely frozen over, which is why this isn't working. Again, this was as a result of the door getting left ajar for some time without me realizing it. In a humid environment, you wouldn't expect this to be normal buildup unless you've got, you know, a bad seal. A couple more elk shoulder blades, hopefully the subject of another arrow kind of penetration testing video here in the near future, so stay tuned for that. All right, to start, we need to remove some of these grates and get them out of the way. That sensor does have an off switch, so I just hit that so it won't be quite as annoying. All right, so we've got quite a bit of frost built up, and we need to remove some screws to be able to remove it. In this particular model, this is the panel that I need to remove. Depending on your model, it may be positioned a little different. Now, if we just wait for this to defrost naturally, although it is pretty warm here in Houston, it's going to take a long time. So I'm going to speed that process up a bit with a blow dryer. All right, I've got it defrosted enough where I think I can remove this panel, so that's what we're going to do next. So let me take a couple seconds and add a few notes here. So the first is that since we're defrosting this freezer, there will be water running out, and we're using electrical appliances to do this. So of course, be careful with where that water is running, where your power strip is, and where the wires and parts of the hair dryer or other appliances are. You don't want to get those wet and potentially cause an electrocution hazard. The second thing is that you don't necessarily need to use a hair dryer to do this. By far, I think the biggest factor here is the air movement, at least if you're above freezing ambient temperatures, which certainly is the case here in Houston right now. So if you have a box fan or some other type of fan that you can use, that will work just as well as a hair dryer. You don't necessarily need the heat. Pay attention to the screws that you're taking out. In my case, these two longer ones go on these side holes. I think all the other ones are the same. All right, so those are the insides of mine. You can see that the wires are connected to this panel, so I'm not going to remove it from the freezer altogether, but just wanted to expose the cooling elements and to see where the frost buildup is. And as you can see, there's pretty hefty buildup down here at the bottom. Now, by far the safest way to remove this, instead of trying to chisel it out because you might break or damage something, puncture something in that system, is to run this blow dryer, hair dryer again, and just melt it all out, and it'll actually do it pretty quickly. So I'm gonna hit go on this thing, and I'm just gonna let it run. It'll probably take 30 minutes, maybe an hour to melt all this down, and then it'll be ready to go. Good time to clean the inside of your freezer too, of course, so I'll be doing that too with just wiping it down. All right, you get to melting this stuff down. So real quick, you can see that big giant ice block that's down there. Of course, it's causing an issue. There's actually a drain plug under there as well, which I'm sure is right in here somewhere. I think we'll see it once it's defrosted, but any liquid should drain out of there, but because it's all frosted up, it's plugged up for sure. So anyway, I'm gonna get this thing going and let it go until it's all defrosted. All right, everyone, not the best light here, but exactly 1 hour since I started running the hair dryer to defrost everything, and that giant block of ice is gone. That drain is now free and moving, and so everything is completely defrosted. It only took an hour. In fact, it probably took less time. I went and ate dinner and came back, and it was already well thawed out. So I'm gonna wipe this down, clean it up a little bit, put this panel back on, and start up the freezer again, and then repack it with all the frozen meat I had. Should be working just like new. Well, everyone, I hope you took away a couple of tips and tricks around your freezer and how important it is to protect it and all the valuable goods that you store in it. As I mentioned before, the couple things that I mentioned, I think these are on Amazon. I'll leave links to those in the description below. As always, if you found this information useful, please hit the like button, leave comments below, and consider subscribing to the channel. I don't post that often, so if you hit the notification bell, you will be notified when I do post, so you can check out those videos. Very much greatly appreciate your support. Until next time, y'all take care.